Good evening. Right now, Metro Police are desperately searching for the person or people responsible for killing a man and a woman.
I got a male down in the middle of the street.
Breaking news now, a triple shooting leaves 2 dead.
Never expect for somebody to tell you your loved one was murdered.
This Labor Day will mark 42 years that have haunted the St. Cloud family.
30 years. 30 years this family has waited for answers.
A couple months go by, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you really start to struggle with the idea that the case might not get solved and that somebody might get away with murder.
It's very unfortunate that we have any cold cases at all, and certainly unfortunate that we have as many as we do. And that's why Ryan's work and the work of Project Cold Case is so important.
Hey, thank you for joining us today, Tuesday, July 9th. We have a guest we've been talking about for months. Every time we seem to be on here talking about a specific case, we talk about Crime Stoppers. We give out the tip line for our local cases, and we ask anybody with information to come forward, and we kind of do a quick description of our understanding of what Crime Stoppers is and what that means to call in a tip anonymously and collect a reward. But we wanted to get straight from the executive director's mouth the facts on Crime Stoppers, why it's such an important tool, especially for us when we're dealing with cold case homicides. We're trying to get this information out there, so if somebody has information, they'll come forward. And this is, the easiest way and the most foolproof way to do it. So joining us today is First Coast Crime Stoppers Executive Director Wyllie Hodges.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Yeah. Wyllie and I have go back almost 10 years now, because 10 years ago when my dad was killed, an anonymous donor came to your office, said, I want to write a check for an enhanced reward on the murder of Cliff Backman. You called me up, gave me that information. We had a press conference, and then I kind of leaned on you a few times early on in the years. We'd go to lunch, and I always tell people, when you're dealing with a murder in your family or crime in your family, you start to assume things, and you think you know things. You create these scenarios in your head, and a lot of times that can be detrimental to yourself and your relationships. And so what I did was I tried to educate myself, and I've met people like you that I felt like I could trust and I could talk to, I could ask questions, and so you would do that for me, which I always appreciated. And here we are now, again almost 10 years later, and you're still executive director of Crime Stoppers, still doing great work. And I know that over the years, just the conversations that we've had, there are some misconceptions in the community. Sometimes people don't have all the information. And if we can get it out there and help educate and help people learn what to do in a scenario where they have information on a crime, right, then we're doing a good thing.
Yeah. And that's the key to the whole program, is understanding it and getting people to believe in the program, if you will, and believe what we're saying. And I don't want to jump ahead of you if you had other questions, but just very, very briefly, and we'll talk a little more in depth about it. But the heart of the program is very, very simple, and it's Crime Stoppers gives people the opportunity to call, report crime, criminals. If their information leads to an arrest, they get a reward, and we guarantee anonymity. It's a real simple process, and I could take an hour to tell you that same thing. Right. But that's the heart of the program, and getting people to believe that. If people will believe about the anonymity, that no one will ever know who called or ever know what they told, we don't even know who you are. We don't want to know who you are. And that's what makes the program work, and that's why we get so many tips and solve a lot of cases.
I want to get into some of that a little bit, because I remember who's the guy who was down in Miami that was the executive director that was on the stand
that ate the note,
ate the piece of paper that had whatever a name on it or had some kind of identifying mark, and And that, I mean, this has been, it's been through the court system.
Yeah.
It's been through, you know, it's tried and tested, and you are anonymous if you call Crime Stoppers.
That's correct.
But now we'll get into that a little bit. Your anonymity begins and ends with that call to your hotline, to the Crime Stoppers hotline. That's not necessarily the case. If you call me, I can't guarantee that. If you call, you know, another organization, if you call the sheriff's office, you know, there's no guarantees there. But you actually are, you know, through the courts of law, their information is protected. But you don't even get it. You don't ask for it.
No, as a matter of fact, if they try to tell us who they are, what they are, and where they live, we'll stop them. You know, we have a call center actually that all of our calls go through, and our call center is actually in Canada. But the calls go through there. Doesn't matter what kind of language you speak, they got someone there that can take your call. The only people, if you try to tell them who you are, they'll stop you. All they want is your information, and then they will give you a name, or not a name, but a number.
Yeah.
That's all we ever know you by.
Yeah.
And you know, in past years, I've been subpoenaed about who gave this information, and I think that the courts realize now that I don't know.
Yeah.
I can give you a code number that, and if you can figure it out, then so be it. But it's,
you can use that code to go to the bank and make a withdrawal, but it's probably money's probably gone.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, see, some of your background, just so people know, you were in law enforcement for a long time. You worked your way up, I guess, like most people, starting in patrol.
Right.
Hit the points along the way, all the way up to undersheriff.
That's correct.
And so that's, you know, I mean, you don't, not hard to figure out how high up the chain that is. There's an elected sheriff, and then there's an appointed undersheriff.
Right.
So that's second in command of a pretty large agency.
I was very fortunate in my career. I enjoyed every minute of it, and well, maybe not every minute, but I enjoyed the better part of it, like anybody in any career. But I enjoyed it, and I was successful with it, and fortunate. To be that successful.
Yeah, and your reputation is pretty stellar. I think I always enjoy when we go to lunch. First of all, because somebody knows you no matter what restaurant we walk into, but the respect that they show you, you know what I mean? Like they just, I mean, you built a career on actions and kind of, you know, being respectful but being fair and just.
Well, to me, that's extremely important. I mean, that's the way I want to be treated, and so why wouldn't I treat other people the same way?
Well, I remember some of the stories you tell about when you were undersheriff, and you'd say, like, look, this is right and this is wrong, and I don't, you know, like, there is no gray area there. You know, I'm not going to, you know, if you're wrong, you're wrong. Own it, and we go from there.
Move forward.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to stomp somebody when they're wrong. We all make mistakes.
Right.
But let's address it and get past it and move on.
Yeah. I've always respected that about you, Wyllie. But what's funny is everybody knows that watches this. I like to do research. I like to, you know, try to find something about our guests that, you know, is unique or that maybe the rest of the population doesn't know yet. And I found a 1972 news article with Vice Detective Wyllie Hodges making an arrest in the test driving bandit. Who this was a little before my time, Wyllie, but there was a guy that would go test drive cars at these secondhand lots.
Right.
He'd tell me he's going to take it for a spin. He'd go to the bank, the drive-up teller, I think, and he'd slip him a note that said he had a bomb and he was going to blow the place up if they didn't give him money. They'd give him some money, and he'd take off, and he'd dump the car somewhere. And he had done this a few times, successfully and unsuccessfully. And then on this particular day, we got the newspaper clip here. You won't be able to read it, but basically on this particular day, this guy had already done it once earlier that day, and then he had robbed a second bank. And can you tell us what you're coming over the Main Street Bridge? And they
actually, myself and my partner at the time, which was Claude Locke. Claude was driving, and we're going across the Main Street Bridge, and they'd given out the information. Of course, we were in a plain car, and at this time I was long-haired, hippie-type, undercover,
you were undercover.
type of individual. And so we're going across the bridge, and I said, Claude, there's the car, and going in the opposite way. And so we wheeled around on the bridge and saw the guy changing clothes. So that was a pretty good clue. Yep, I think we're on the right track here. So, about that time he saw us wheel around on the bridge, and he knew that we were on to him. Of course, he I don't know what kind of car he thought. Why are you in that? But anyhow, to make a long story short, we proceeded to ended up in a chase downtown. On the sidewalks and everywhere else, downtown traffic. And the chase is quite exciting, to say the least. Anyhow, ultimately, he ran into a tree, and we were able to apprehend him. And as fate would have it, he was an employee of the sheriff's office with the corrections officer. And that was his second bank that day. He had the money in two different bags in the floorboard of the car, and he said, "Yeah, you got me." He was very cordial about being caught, but I think at that point he was quite glad that he just didn't get hurt in the chase and the wreck.
Yeah. I think he probably thought he had a pretty good idea here. If you're going to be a criminal, I'm not in my car. Right. I'm not, but. Those kinds of things are going to catch up to you at some point, hopefully. So, well, good work then.
Well, it was fun. I mean, you hate to say something involving crime was fun, but it was fun catching him.
Yeah.
It was somewhat fulfilling.
Yeah, you spent a number of years undercover, didn't you?
I did. I spent about probably 4 or 5 years undercover work. Yeah.
Was that? Do you have a most enjoyable part of your career in law enforcement? Everything was so different. I imagine undercover to undersheriff; those are two different worlds.
Yeah, it is too. In looking back, I guess I really enjoyed every part of my career.
Yeah.
And when I first made sergeant, I thought this is the best job in the world. You don't have to write as many reports. You get to go to all the stuff, and then you make lieutenant and so on and so forth. And with each rank, a little bit more responsibility and honestly, a little less on the street policing goes on. I did enjoy my time in narcotics. I had some strange times, some close calls that I wouldn't want to reenact.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But it was really a good time that I enjoyed, and we've done, I think, a lot of good. As a young policeman, you always think that by the time I retire, there won't be anybody left to put in jail.
Yeah,
and that you're going to clean the city up, and obviously that didn't work because I've been retired a while yet, and there's still crime going on.
But you're still trying to get them off the street.
But we're still working at it. You can't give up, and because they're not going to give up.
No.
So law enforcement and those that help law enforcement can't give up, and I talked about the crime stoppers. I appreciate what you do also.
Yeah, well, thank
because
you.
those cases, those cold cases, people need closure, and they go for years and years. And your dads.
Yeah.
We talked about your dads a while ago, and his dad is one of the very few people that we've never got a single tip on, and I don't think that the sheriff's office ever got any information whatsoever on that case, and that's bizarre.
Yeah.
There's hardly ever a crime that's committed in a vacuum, and this has been one of them.
And we had that enhanced reward for a number of years.
Yes.
And you think that something like that will, if anybody was out there. I mean, we had conversations one time, because as a family you think, oh well, maybe we need to increase the reward more. Maybe we need to, and I came to you and I said, well, should we start collecting money to keep increasing it? And you said, look, if they see that the reward keeps going up, they may just sit back and see how high it goes.
Right.
And you said, and quite honestly, from where we sit, the amount of money we had out there at the time, if somebody was going to do it, they were going to do it for that amount. It didn't need to get up into six figures or, some crazy amount. Like most of these, for years, the payout was up to 1,000.
Right.
and you were getting tons of tips for $1,000, you know. So now at 3,000, you get even more tips, I'm sure. But
Yeah. Well, you know, money is not the whole thing. And in all honesty, I've got money sitting in the bank with some that all people have to do would be to drive through the teller and give them the right name or the right code, and they could get it. Thousands of dollars, and that people haven't picked up.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
And a lot of them tell us when they call and give the information, they say, "I don't care about your reward. All I want is I'm trying to do the right thing."
The right thing.
And
yeah.
You know, so,
I've actually
that's good.
I've done that too. You know, a lot of times people will come to me and tell me stuff that I'm not a witness. You know, I can't provide that information. I would do no good to testify. You know, I'm getting this second, third, fourth hand sometimes, but sometimes I feel like it's valuable information,
Right.
and so it needs to end up in the right hands. And not always do I know who those right hands are. So I have in the past, you know, submitted a tip to Crime Stoppers, you know, and then I never even thought to go back and look.
Don't tell me which one.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't do it. And I never even thought to go back and look, you know what I mean, to see if it led to an arrest. You know, so yeah, you know, you just, it's nice to know that there are people out there that do it because it's the right thing. Because there are some cases, my dad's probably a prime example, where, you know, an anonymous tip might not be enough. You know what I mean? To make an arrest, and somebody may have to physically be willing to testify in that case. You know what I mean?
You know, usually, and everything starts with a bit of information, and be that from someone that the police have talked to, or be that from an anonymous tip. And I mean, as you're saying there, just because you call us and give us a tip, don't mean that we can run out and make the arrest.
Right.
That information is just what it is. That's information, and it gives something to build on and build from. And as we say, you know, if your tip leads to an arrest, well, if that information you gave us helps leads to the arrest in that case, then we do pay the reward, and we pay it upon arrest.
Yeah.
Not arrest and conviction, which could be years down the road. We pay it upon arrest, and you know, with anybody that has any kind of information on a crime or a criminal, you've got two options. You got three. You can not say anything and be part of the problem.
Right.
You can go to the police, and if you're afraid of going to the police for whatever reason, be that retribution, or you're afraid to go to court, you can't take off, or even if you don't like the police. I mean, that's bad, but it's true.
Right, it happens, yeah.
Then we're that alternative. You know, we're the people that you can call, give that information to. We will make sure that the information gets in the right hands, and we will make sure that it's worked on, and you remain anonymous. So I guess the bottom line, what I'm saying is, if you have information, there's absolutely no excuse for you not to give that information to either the police or to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, we sit here every day, and you know, in this office, and we are dealing with unsolved crimes. You know, I mean, these are murders, but they're unsolved crimes that somebody out there has information.
Sure.
You know, and so you know, it just like you said, these things don't typically happen in a vacuum. No. Somebody's talked to somebody. Somebody was a witness. You know, I was having a conversation earlier today about cold cases, particularly homicides, and how so many of them are solved by a change in relationship. So it's, you know, you've got technology, and that's a great tool, but a lot of our old cases, homicide cases, are somebody that's a ex-wife, you know, ex-boyfriend, you know what I mean, no longer friends, like whatever that change in relationship is. They're sitting out there with this information, and they're a phone call away from being a few bucks richer, and you know, and getting a bad guy off the streets, and preventing, you know, that same hurt and pain, you know, happening to another family and loss. Right. So a couple of things I have written down that I wanted to be sure to ask you. You mentioned the call centers in Canada. So if I call our local number, which is 866-845-TIPS.
Right.
but I have information on a case that happened in Iowa. I can still call this local number. It goes to that call center. How does that work if I have
correct.
information on a?
Yeah, I mean, let me get it straight from the beginning. Crime Stoppers is a nationwide program. We are one of many programs. First Coast Crime Stoppers, we cover 6 counties. We cover Duval, Clay, Nassau, Union, Baker, and Bradford County. And then there's someone else that covers maybe 1 county, maybe 2 or 3 counties.
Yeah.
But it's a nationwide program. And, you know, if you were here and you called that 1-866 number, which is our number, because each program has their own number.
They typically all have tips. They're still the same.
Usually all of them will end in tips.
Yeah.
But if you were to call here, and even if the center gave us the information, we would immediately send it to the correct
jurisdiction or agency.
Jurisdiction.
Gotcha.
So
I always
it's not an
wonder
issue. Yeah.
if somebody sees that and goes, well, I have information, but my information's on a Georgia case. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
no.
I'm not going to take the time to find their Crime Stoppers. I'll just sit on it. But I wanted to make
call
sure
it.
people know.
We'll
Call.
find it.
Yeah,
We'll
that's great information.
No, that
to have.
happens regular, actually.
Yeah, does it? That's good to know. And then we talked a little bit about the anonymity, and I think you touched on it, that when you call, you are not asked for your name, you're not asked for your number, you are assigned basically a random code or number, and the only reason you're assigned that is in case there's a reward attached to it.
Well, there's a couple reasons. Number one, we have once you make the call. Well, before we get too far into it, let me tell you how all you can contact.
Yeah.
You know, it's not only the 1-866-845-TIPS number. You can also go online and go to www.firstcoastcrimestoppers.com, or this is what is relatively new, and with the use of phones anymore, if you go to your iPhone and you go to your
App Store
and you type in P3 tips, and from that it will guide you through and put you into that program. And all 3 of these are guaranteed anonymity.
Yeah.
And actually the internet and the phone are the P3 number is really good for us because we can actually converse with you without knowing who you are. We can ask you certain questions or get back to you and but still not knowing who you are or where you are.
Right. I could see that somebody submits a tip online,
right,
and they leave something open ended, or you have one thing that you'd like to be able to ask them, and you have no way of doing that. But
but on a phone call, we don't know where they're calling from, who they are, and we only wait. But once they make that call and give us that information, that code is good for a number of reasons. Number one, we tell them to call a particular number, which is also an anonymous number. It can't be traced, which is in our local office. And every week, I think it's every Thursday from like 10 to 2, I think I have someone that's on that line to give them information on their tip. In other words, you call it, we'll tell you they're still investigating it, or it wasn't valid, or yes, the tip was good and it led to an arrest and we're going to pay you a reward. So from that point, I have a board of directors. We got 16 people on our board of directors. We meet monthly. We talk about the cases. We decide the amount of money that's going to be paid for the reward. And so then the next time we'll tell you to call back after that meeting date. And on that date, we'll tell you how much you're going to get and where to get it and what to do.
So that leads me to another question. We always hear, and we always put it on our cases, up to $3,000. That's because you guys accept tips on any crime.
Any crime.
So somebody stole a bike, broke into a car, and murdered somebody. Like any one of those things, somebody can call in and provide the information. But the reward amount, you don't pay out $3,000 to a car or a bicycle being stolen typically, right? That's
I'd go broke.
Yeah. That's
no, but it is up to 3,000. I can tell you that any murder is automatic 3,000, and then it goes kind of down down the road, according to how severe, how violent,
Yeah.
and whatever that the crime was. Man,
And where's that money-
determination is from our board meeting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the board members talk about the case, and we put a number on it and go from there. But you were.
I was going to ask where that money originates
Come
from. I mean,
You know,
you're a nonprofit. People can
We are a nonprofit.
contribute.
Yes, we have. Well, let me tell you where our base money comes from, and then let me tell you where else we get and need money from,
Right.
like everybody else.
Sure.
But our base money Florida is one of the states that we have a state statute that mandates if you are arrested and found guilty of the crime, then part of your sentencing is you pay $20 into the Crime Stoppers Fund, even if adjudication is withheld.
Okay.
So, unfortunately, all of our criminals don't obey the law, so they don't always pay their money.
Yeah.
If they did, I would be fine with finances, but they don't. So we have to do fundraisers. Now, I do a couple fundraisers a year. I do a shoot usually in April, and I do a golf tournament out at Deerwood in October, October 21st, if anyone's interested. By the way. And to help supplement the money that we have coming in, because the good and bad of being successful, and our program has been very successful, is the more successful you are, the more you have to spend.
The more people are using it, the more money's going out.
That's right. So we have to do that. And then, of course, we have some people, and we certainly encourage anyone that can and will to just send us money.
Yeah.
But,
And families can contribute. We've talked about this. I know it's not always, but a family can come to you and say, I would like to add to
Absolutely.
my Crime Stoppers reward. And this is something that I definitely want to talk about, because this is important information, I feel, for the families. Most of the people that are going to watch this is the way Crime Stopper sets that up is, I mean, you have accounts for specific crimes or victims.
Yeah, let me walk you through that, if you would. I know, and your dad's case was one of them.
Right.
But when I say that the murders we do up to $3,000, it's automatic $3,000. Well, a lot of times you'll see a case, and it's like they reward us $10,000.
Right.
Well, where'd the other $7,000 come from? And we've had calls from people. I want mine to be that also. But anything over $3,000 is something that was given to us either through the family or an organization or a business
Anonymous
or whatever,
donor, business.
to enhance that reward. And what we do, if someone calls and says, I want to enhance that reward an additional $5,000, then we meet with them, we get the money, they sign an agreement with us for how long we will hold the money, and if it's not solved by then, they have the option of leaving it in, or we write them a check back.
Right.
But what happens when we get that money, we've got a bunch of different accounts in the bank, because that money will go into a separate bank account for that particular individual under Crime Stoppers. We can't use that money for anything else or anybody else, and it stays there until hopefully we get to spend it because we solve the crime.
Right.
But if we don't, it stays there until there's some determination on what we're going to do with it. So it's not like it gets thrown into a batch of money, and it covers us, and it covers. I think people like to hear that and know that their money is in a separate account,
right,
and it's going to be there for sure. If we solve the crime, so it works. It works great.
It does.
And unfortunately, like say, sometimes we don't solve them.
Right.
But sometimes
not for a lack
we
of
do.
trying, though.
And,
It's
and we've paid out some big rewards in the past, and we're tickled pink to pay rewards because that means that we solved the crime.
Absolutely. That was kind of, I wanted to get, we talk about fine print. People always ask, what the fine print is. And basically with Crime Stoppers, the fine print is just that you have to call that Crime Stoppers tip line first.
Yeah. You have to call us first because the program is set up for people that are not going to call the police.
Right.
And it's set up for people that are afraid to call the police or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And so the program nationwide, it's not just us, is to be eligible for a reward, you have to call us first. We get the information, and we will go from there. And you know, if you call and say, "Well, I've given this information to the police, and they've been working on it for a week or two, and I'm calling
Now I
you
decided
now."
I wanted.
Well, and that's great, and we'll take your information, but you're not eligible for any kind of reward, and we'll pass that information on to the police or the sheriff's office, whichever one's working the case. But to be eligible for a reward, you have to call us first and get your code number. And I know we get asked from time, well, what if it's an emergency? And you know, if it's an emergency, you do what you got to do.
Yeah.
But let me tell you how we handle emergencies. You know, if you feel like that you need to call the police, then you call the police. And trust me, you know, I was 34 years with the sheriff's office. So the best case scenario is always call the police, go to court, testify.
Right. Strengthen the case.
Yeah, but more often than it used to, people don't want to do that. They're not going to do it. So we're that intercessory that can take care of that issue for you. But you've got to call us first to be eligible for the reward. And on emergencies, what happens is say you're watching TV or Facebook, anything, and you say, well, I just saw that guy's picture a while ago. Well, that was just on TV. He just robbed a bank. And you're in the grocery store, and there he is.
Yeah.
That's an emergency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Because he's not going to be at the grocery store for a week. And so, you know, you call, and if it's an emergency situation, whenever you call and give the information, you say, you know, I saw this guy on TV. He's wanted for a robbery. He's in the store. And the people that take your number, our call people, they will immediately call the sheriff's office and give them the information.
Your guy
and
is
then
right
they will
there
call
right
us after the fact.
Yeah.
And say, this was emergency. We already given this to the police. They're already on it, and now we're just going to give you the information back.
Yeah.
So they just back thread it, and so you get the information immediately. So that takes care of the emergency part of it.
That's good to know, and kind of the, you know, we talk about that fine print with the rewards is, you know, you're not responsible for other rewards, because sometimes individuals are willing to offer rewards. Sometimes organizations offer reward. We get asked occasionally if we offer rewards, and we say no. And I say, do you take tips? And I say no. And I said, we get tips occasionally,
Sure.
but I can't guarantee anonymity,
Right.
and I'm not, I don't have the funding to provide rewards, and Crime Stoppers does that and does it well. So why would I, overlap in something that you've already got under control?
Yeah.
So that's, kind of the message that we send is that, if Crime Stoppers is offering $3,000, the family is offering $1,000, and whatever Joe's business shop has $20,000, you've got a confusion is what you've got.
Right, that's true.
Because first of all, you guys, you have your process, and your payout is on an arrest. And a lot of times those other organizations and businesses, they think they're doing the right thing, and they say, well, we'll pay out after an arrest and conviction. Right. Well, we just had a murder trial that took 5.5 years to get to the jury.
Yeah, that's not unusual.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about waiting for a conviction.
Right.
I mean,
you could forget it.
Typically,
you could forget that you called.
Right. Typically, the people that are calling these in is, if they want the reward, it's because they need the reward, not because this is an investment plan where they think they're going to get, a large check in 6 years. Right. And so I think when it's important that the public understand that, Crime Stoppers is Crime Stoppers, and you've got these guarantees. You're guaranteed anonymity, you're guaranteed to get paid upon an arrest. But that's all you control. If somebody else has some other money some other way, you don't know how they're paying out or their guidelines.
But amongst that is a lot of confusion, and what happens? They see the Crime Stoppers on TV, and the news media, and I'm not downing the news media for what they do, but it gets confusing. Say we've got 3,000 on the case. Say the family may have 3,000 on the case. The company's got 5,000 on the case. So when they put the information out, call Crime Stoppers at 1-866-845-TIPS.
They add all that up.
Yeah, and the reward is now, $10,000-$15,000. And then what happens, of course, is if that information solves the crime, people call us and want the $10,000 or $15,000.
Right. You've got $3,000
We're
sitting
very
on the.
explicit and try to be extremely explicit that how much we have that Crime Stoppers is paying out. And like you said, I'm not saying that no one should ever do that, but please, if you do that, please let them know that this is the family is doing this, and it's not through Crime Stoppers.
It's a separate.
And if they want to do it through Crime Stoppers, we discussed earlier how they can do that.
Right, and I always
and that makes it simple for everyone.
Yeah, that's always my recommendation to the family. If they come to me and ask about rewards, I always give them your information. I say, look, it's a proven method,
right?
And I mean, I think we can talk about it. The money that was put up in my dad's case, it ended up going back to the anonymous donor because what you said earlier. I mean, that had been 4 years, I think, at the time, 4.5 years, and had not generated one tip. I mean, that was always that donor's money. You know what I mean? Sure. And, so I was always grateful that he had put it up for the amount of time that he did, but it's a little bit, tough for me to sit there and ask him to keep it in there when it's not doing what its job is. And provide that. Right? Crime Stoppers gives somebody that option. Well, you may have an extra $5,000 this year to put towards your loved one's reward fund, and then next year, 2 years down the road, you might lose a job, and you may, and that money hasn't generated any tips or leads.
There's nothing wrong with asking for the money back.
Yeah.
If we can't solve the case in a certain amount of time, and people shouldn't feel bad about it. However, would we love them to leave it in there so we can pay on other cases? Sure, we would.
Yeah.
But any nonprofit is out there trying to survive.
You need every dime,
and you need every nickel you can get to survive. And the more money that you got to use, the more you can get your message out, and the more that you can solve with that message. So.
Well, Crime Stoppers is a great tool, and we promote it. In all of our cases that we spotlight, anything that we do, we always add. And we search for any cases that aren't local. We search for that area's Crime Stoppers as well, so that we can provide, that information. Oh, it's good to know that I can. That doesn't have to be specific to that. That you guys will figure out where
we'll figure out where it needs to go. And we, like I say, we pass on and we receive. From different places, because you don't want once someone calls, you don't want to say, well, no, don't give me that. Call this. Place. You
as
get
soon
one
as you
shot.
do that, that's right.
You get one shot at getting the information, and we'll figure out where it goes. So call us or wherever you're at. Call, and if it belongs to us, they'll get it to us, and vice versa. We'll get it.
And so I mean, I guess the payouts are pretty rapid as far as once an arrest is made. The following month, the next board meeting, basically, whatever the timeline is within the next board meeting.
The longest it could be is 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And
that basically, if the arrest happens the day after your board meeting,
you wait a month. If it's the middle, it's 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's pretty quick.
Yeah, that's always. It's good to know, and it's good to know that a murder is 3,000. Because I sometimes wonder with up to people don't quite understand that we're talking about murders, but somebody that has information on a burglary or a robbery still is encouraged to call Crime Stoppers and is eligible for a reward.
Absolutely.
We want all the bad guys caught.
And we've paid on some other cases that were pretty heinous crimes that didn't result in a murder, but could have very easily have.
Yeah.
We've paid up to 3,000. We've paid 3,000 on those.
Yeah.
But we pay anything from a simple misdemeanor all the way up to anything terrorist. We've gotten calls on terrorism. We've got calls that we pass on to not just the local sheriff's office and PDs, but to the DEA, Drug Enforcement to the FBI.
Right.
We've passed a lot of information on, and proud to say that we've been very successful, in solving crime.
Let's talk about some of these payout numbers and these arrest numbers, because we're pretty well. I think we've given everybody the information, but to show how successful Crime Stoppers has been, you brought some numbers, and I think this is just as interesting as anything else.
Yeah, let me, and I don't want to bore people with stats because I know stats are pretty boring, but some of this is really good to know information because it shows you that it works.
Yeah. And
it makes people believe that, this thing does work. Since we've started our program here, which was started in 2004, I believe it was, the number of tips that we have received is 46,709 tips. I can tell you, I've been with the program for almost 12 years now. And when I first started, our tips coming in was less than 1,000 tips, and now, actually right now, so far this year, we're up to 3,351 tips. So, the program does work, and the more that we can get this information out through various types of media, and people believe in it, then it'll continue. On arrest, we've 3,778 arrests. The rewards that have been eligible for rewards is at $1,526,105, and total property, including narcotics, that we have seized during this time is $17,945 worth.
Jeez.
And and one stat that you can't really say you're proud of, but you're glad that you've solved so many, and that is on murders. And of course, it's bad to have this many murders, but we have solved, our tips have solved, led to this 117 arrests for murder. That's a lot.
That is a lot. That is a whole lot.
And some of these have been cold cases. I know that some of these have been 10, 15-year-old cases, and a lot of them haven't. But most of these are information that people were not going to call the police for. And we also have a gun bounty program that, if I can take 1 minute or so and talk about the gun bounty. The gun bounty program is we pay an additional $1,000 for anyone that gives us information on someone that has a gun illegally, or a crime where the gun was used and you could tell us where the gun is. In other words, if you can give us information that links the gun illegally with someone, we seize the gun, and someone is arrested for that gun charge, in addition to whatever else we're going to pay. It's an additional $1,000. So in reality, in a murder case, if you knew where the weapon was and all, and they charge you with that, instead of $3,000, it would be $4,000. And we have spent several $100,000 in that program.
Wow. I didn't, I knew you had that program going for a while. I wasn't sure it was still.
Yeah, it's still
going on.
As a matter of fact, let's see, we've solved, or had made, in the gun bounty program, we've made 363 arrests involved in the gun bounty program.
Wow.
429 weapons seized. So you can figure $1,000 on top of all that.
On each one of those.
It's been a costly thing.
Yeah.
But it's been very successful.
Oh, that's great. Wyllie, I really appreciate you coming out and kind of clarifying or educating. I guess, a lot of us, sometimes we know the information, sometimes we think we know the information, but putting out bad information is bad. That's not what we want to do. You and I have had lots of conversations over the years about the rewards, and I feel like I've had a pretty good grasp on it, but I felt like to have you in here to say, you know, this is how we keep you anonymous. This is how we pay it out. This is when you get paid. This is how much you're going to get paid for a murder, you know, a tip, that it's going to be at an arrest, not conviction. I mean, you know, you're right. We could talk for hours about it, but to even just to sum it up in those key points, you know, that's good information for people out there to have. So hopefully people will watch this. They'll share it. They'll, you know, share it with their social media and their friends, and would love to get a call from you next week that says phones have been blowing up ever since we did this, and maybe we'll solve a couple of these or help get those tips into you so they can be solved.
Right. And it's all about getting the information out, and that's why we get the tips, because we're getting it out. If you've got groups that we can speak to, be more than glad to do that. And neighborhood groups is really good to speak with, and we can talk about the crime in their neighborhood, and we can also tell them how we can help.
It's a good thing to do. We'll have to set something like that up and have you come out, and then you know, I know there's a lot of people out there that, you know, they always come in and they say, well, on the streets I heard this. Right. You know what I mean? The worst ones is families that call and they say, I had a meeting with law enforcement one time, and the woman said, she said, well, what about this car? What about this car? And the detective said, I don't know what you're talking about, that car. And she goes, this car, my neighbor saw this car, this is the partial tag, and I told him to call you. And guess what the neighbor didn't do? The neighbor didn't call. You know, so here's this family member that thinks the biggest tip out there
has been
given, and it hasn't, you know. So those things happen, you know, and that's why Crime Stoppers exists, so that maybe that neighbor would have felt more comfortable, you know, calling that in to you as opposed to calling it in to the actual lead detective.
Like we said earlier, there is no, you can give an excuse, but it's not valid.
Yeah.
If you got information, you give it to the police, you give it to Crime Stoppers. You know, you come forward or you remain anonymous, and it's your choice. But there is no excuse for having it and not passing it on.
That's it.
You know, we're all in this together, and the police aren't omnipresent, and they can't be everywhere. And you know, especially at this point in our history, with violence and all like it is, this is everybody's job.
Yeah.
And police need lots of help.
It's time to get involved. They can't be everywhere at all times, and you know, they need the public more than ever now. Absolutely. You know, so well, we're glad to be a part of that, and again, Crime Stoppers is a wonderful thing, and it's an opportunity. It's solved a lot of crimes, like you've talked about. It's paid out a lot of money. It's a needed and necessary entity within law enforcement, and we're glad to have it, and glad to have a relationship with you and with Crime Stoppers. So thanks again, Wyllie, for joining us. If we come up with any other questions, or maybe one day we get a case that we can talk specifically about that Crime Stoppers help, maybe we can do that sometime in the future.
Great, appreciate it, and I do appreciate the opportunity to come and be with you today, and hope that, like you said, these people will spread what they've heard, and call on us. We got pamphlets, we got all kinds of stuff that we can pass out and give out to groups, and they do absolutely no good sitting in my office.
Sure.
You know, we need them on the street, so
Yeah.
Help us with that.
If anybody needs any of that information, you know, we can get it for you. We can put you in touch with somebody to get it. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to scroll through some of our weekly remembrances here, and we'll check back with you next week. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.